Grab your daily heart, claim your points.
Welcome Gaga and Grumps to Wordle with Gaga.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, Gang Gremlins come, let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it,
Gaga Grumps says, hey there Fatty, how are you today?
let's see those team stickers flow.
Welcome Grumps to Wordle with Gaga. Grumps says at Fatty Hail.
Gang Gremlins on the scene, now tap that screen,
Welcome BLSSOM.VXZ to Wordle with Gaga.
now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says, Blossom in the
Now
house.
tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says, I'm good,
Gang
thanks.
Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says, treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome in guys. Settle down.
Gaga Grumps says, welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to go.
Usan the X3 says hello.
Gang Gremlins on the scene. Gang Gremlins on the scene. Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says, how are you today, Blossom?
Now tap that screen. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang Gremlins come, let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it.
Yellow Some BXC says at Gaga and Grumps stressful. Upcode.
Yellow Some BXC says how's us?
Now tap that screen.
Grumps says at BL0SM.VXZ. Welcome back.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says, I'm ticking along path.
Now tap that screen.
BL0 Some BXC says at Grumps hello.
Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says, okay, who's ready to Wordle with Gaga?
Yellow Some VXZ says at Gaga and Grumps me.
Gaga Grumps says, then let's get the first game started. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says, and my buttons are working today.
BL0 Some VXC says at Grumps you always do Q. Is it her lucky letter?
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says he's just contrary lol. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Why?
Below Some VXD says law.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Blossom. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
The yellow sum VXD says, how many treasure boxes do you send?
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says I try to send one every half hour, but it depends if I remember all. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. BL0SSOMEXZ says that Gaga and Grumps will remind you. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says cheers Blossom. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Y please fatty.
Welcome Never Gava fuck
Gaga
to Wordle
Grumps
with
says
Gaga.
yup you got.
BL Osambi XD says once it hits for 30, I'll shout treasure boxes, remind.
Welcome NUFC Life to Wordle with Gaga.
MVXZ says graph.
Gaga Grumps
Welcome
says a
Scratchy
yellow A
lettering
and
to
H
Wordle
in
with
need of
Gaga.
homes. Gaga Grumps says NUFC. Long time no see.
BL0SSOMVXZ says the Scratchy lettering is A. Welcome Yana to Wordle with Gaga.
NUFC4LIFE says at Gaga and Grumps hello.
BLO Zombie XE says graph.
Gaga Grumps says hi David and Scratchy.
Grumps says at NUFC4 Life higher.
NUFC for Life says at Gaga and Grumps guess who's back again.
Gaga Grumps says graph fits.
BLO Zombie XZ says at NUFC for Life, who are you again?
Welcome MCRKJ to Wordle with
for
Gaga.
LIFE says at BL0SSOM.VXZM him.
BLO Zombie XE says swash.
Gaga Grumps says both the A and H found homes at 3 and 5.
BLO some VXC says that NUFC for life in her.
BLO Zombie XZ says // wash.
Some VXZ says might need a filler.
Welcome the Riley and Corey show to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's go flash and see what we have. Gaga Grumps says we have an Ash.
The yellow sum VXE says swatch.
BLO Some VXE says smash or swash.
There at the end, Corey says I say smash.
Welcome Donny
Gaga
T to
Grumps
Wordle with
says two
Gaga.
options, three guesses.
Thanks for the follow.
Unless we're way off base, we're fine. Gaga Grumps says smash is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says hi Donny, thanks for following.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Blossom VXZ says gotta be swash.
BLO Som VXZ says oh.
Gaga Grumps says it isn't.
Blossom VXZ says crash.
Welcome Alex to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says can't be crash.
BLO Som VXC says at Alex stop spamming.
Gaga Grumps says no R.
Donny T says no R.
Som VXC says gotta be swash.
BL0SSOMBXZ says MBM.
Usam VXD says brash.
Gaga Grumps says no R.
Welcome Mina
Gaga
Kamal to
Grumps
Wordle with
says I see a
Gaga.
wash. Gaga Grumps says never heard of a wash.
Donny T says go for it.
Gaga Grumps says we ran smash already.
Blossom VXZ says a bash.
Grumps says at Mina Kamal smash has been done.
Good game.
It's playtime!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the button!
Good game.
Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Donny. Gaga Grumps says do the to Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Donny T says Gaga and Grumps, you're welcome.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Welcome Chris Martin to Wordle with Gaga.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Dawny T
Welcome
says music.
FOFOSTAR Heart Hands to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga grumps, says Chris in the house. Gaga grumps, says we are starting with A. M.
Fafastar says hi, how are you doing?
Gaga grumps, says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at FOFOSTAR Heart Hands higher.
Like a thorn, race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire like a thorn. Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts beat flying.
Gaga grumps, says hi Fofo, nice to see you again. Gaga grumps, says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga grumps, says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Chris Marvin hi there.
Gaga grumps, says your word starting with M please Chris. Gaga grumps, says music you got.
Donnie T says cutie.
Gaga grumps, says a green U lives at number 2 Wordle Street. I and C need homes. Gaga grumps, says cutie fits.
Donnie T says no can't be.
Gaga grumps, says oops too late.
Donnie T says juice.
Gaga grumps, says but we have honed an E.
Fafastar says juice.
Gaga grumps, says juice works. Gaga grumps, says you know what time it is.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's on the floor, Miss Amy. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place.
Gaga grumps, says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. A. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome Shay to Wordle with Gaga.
Shay says morning. Gaga Grumps says shy in the house. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Donny T says I'm at work, sorry, was serving a customer.
Welcome LL Creative to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says no problem Donny. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with a please Chris. Gaga Grumps says creative in the house. Gaga Grumps says avoid you got. Gaga Grumps says Agrino lives at number 3 Wordle Street.
Donny T says troll.
Gaga Grumps says oh that's no way to talk about Grumps Donny lol.
Donny T says it, Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says troll fits. Gaga Grumps says no change.
Welcome Chris Duncan to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says he wasn't listening either. Gaga Grumps says nice entrance, Chris. Gaga Grumps says smoke works. Gaga Grumps says nice back quote.
Donnie T says smart.
Gaga Grumps says only one choice. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game. Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a live date.
Donnie T says I've got to go with Caption
Wordle with
Dempsey.
Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says thanks for coming, Donnie. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da da da. A Wordle with Gaga. Ra
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says and he didn't request it. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Q. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers
Gaga Grumps says want to
Welcome Muslin to Wordle with Gaga.
Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Welcome Holly Wheeler to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says hi Mrs. LHYN. Gaga Grumps says there was a lot of sniping going on in the last seconds. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q please Mrs. LHYN.
Welcome Tessa to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says and I've just noticed it's Ms. not Mrs. Damn eyesight. Gaga Grumps says quail you got. Gaga Grumps says hi Tessa.
Tessa says hi.
Gaga Grumps says a green ewe lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Welcome fully to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says did you just change it? Lol. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following fully and hi. Gaga Grumps says super fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Ms. LHYN.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Welcome to Wordle with
Gaga
Gaga.
Grumps says we are starting with A. R. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says hi Bolle, welcome back.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat flying, like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with R, please creative. Gaga Grumps says hi there JIX.
LL Creative 1 says react.
Jix says at Gaga and Grumps.
Welcome Jix to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says react you got. Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 2R and need homes. Gaga Grumps says feral fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 2 for the second time.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within
Gaga
3, so
Grumps
gifts
says
flow
Wordle in
with
3.
glee.
Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
LL Creative 1 says I'm surprised the word gave 3 letters. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says yep, it was a great starter creative. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Z.
Welcome Meow, KAT, to Wordle with Gaga. Welcome Meow.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat flying, like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says hi there meow. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Z please mus LHYN. Gaga Grumps says zebra you got.
Jix says zebra.
Welcome Handy to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says a green E lives at number 2. Gaga Grumps says hey there Handy.
Handy says Wennis.
Gaga Grumps says lemon fits. Gaga Grumps says we have a yellow N in need of a home.
Handy says Wennis.
Welcome
Gaga
Panda to
Grumps
Wordle with
says
Gaga.
I don't think Wennis is a word. Gaga Grumps says it won't be plural panda. Gaga Grumps says dense works.
Grumps says it Trina welcome back.
Trina says afternoon.
Welcome Trina to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps
Welcome
says
Hyacinth
N
to
moved
Wordle
into
with
number
Gaga.
3 and another E into 5.
Trina says it Grumps, thank you. What creative one says fence?
Gaga Grumps says Trina in the house.
Below some VXZ says Tench.
Gaga Grumps says fence fits. BL0SSOMVXZ says Tench Henson fence.
BL0SSOMVXZ says Tench.
Below VXZ says need a filler.
Below some VXD says could do hinge genie tench.
BL Som VXZ says do think for hinge and tench.
Gaga Grumps says bit late for filler. Genie will test for hinge. I'm not sure tench is a word.
Bull Som VXZ says Tench.
Below VXZ says NVM.
DLO Some VXZ says pen.
Welcome MR Heart Hands to Wordle with Gaga. Welcome Morg at Enter Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says venue fits.
Welcome Rex and Rocks to Wordle with Gaga. Welcome Amberlyn to Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says completely missed this tap. Gaga Grumps says cross all your bits. Gaga Grumps says penne. Who said penne?
Jake says me.
Gaga Grumps says I'm so sorry Blossom. Gaga Grumps says MJIX. Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Jix says and someone else.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Trina says has creative got first chance of word yet today?
Gaga Grumps says yes last game. Gaga Grumps says it was a Wordle in 2. LL Creative One says at Trina yes when I first got here. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Trina says are nice. And I missed it, sad face.
Gaga Grumps says we had 2 in 2s in a row. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. J. Gaga Grumps says followed by loss to bring us back down to earth lol. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with J, please creative. Gaga Grumps says did I thank you for doing your daily heart, Trina?
Or creative one says yeah.
A creative one says Jinky.
Gaga Grumps says I don't know what Jeer is, but I'll give it a spin.
Trina says at Gaga, and Grumps you did, and you're welcome.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle says now.
A creative one says Joust.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle says no to Jinky too. Gaga Grumps says Joust you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure
The creative one says can't think of many J words.
Oh no. Wipeout.
Welcome DLDLFC to Wordle with Gaga.
Trina says Baker.
Gaga Grumps says Baker fits. Gaga Grumps says yellow A and K in need of homes.
Trina says plank.
Gaga Grumps says plank works.
Trina says Jock.
Gaga Grumps says A and K moved into 3 and 5L needs a home.
A creative one says Chalk.
Gaga Grumps says chalk is a good shout.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says GG
Welcome in,
Gremlins.
guys.
Let's see those
Settle
W's in the chat.
Grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those teams.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, W. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with W please Trina.
Trina says waist please.
Gaga Grumps says waste you got.
O Creative One says W Trina.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says yellow A in need of a home.
Trina says peach.
Gaga Grumps says peachy.
Well, Creative One says plank.
Trina says brave.
Gaga Grumps says alive's at number 3. E needs a home.
Well, Creative One says crave.
Gaga Grumps says brave works. Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 5.
Trina says flame.
The Creative One says no R.
Trina says glade.
Trina says lots of options.
LL Creative 1 says filler. Gaga Grumps says him shall we filter for consonants now.
Or Creative 1 says flags.
Trina says lodge for filler.
Gaga Grumps says I agree.
Trina says fake flame.
Gaga Grumps says yep, 2 options, 2 guesses.
Welcome Eden Heart Hands to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says and of course.
Trina says had to be the non-opted one lol.
Gaga Grumps says me and 50-50 lol.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the buttons!
Well, Creative 1 says that was blows.
Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
Creative 1 says close.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game!
Gaga Grumps says yes and no. I wasn't worried at the end lol. Gaga Grumps says do the Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Gremlins, let's go!
Trina says I have to say I'm on Gaga's team when my words are chosen, but Grumps for Kate chat haha.
Trina says I'm only joking.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grumps says lol he's a foodie. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Shauna's.
Welcome Shawners to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the hand. Here's Trina. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
We would be honored.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Why? Gaga Grumps says you're welcome, Rex. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Shawners.
Thanks for the follow. It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong. You guessed
Gaga
it
Grumps
right.
says Trina
Now
with the level
here
up.
we are, another height. If support was letters, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked. Shout out, check. New fandom level streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Gaga
We would
Grumps
be
says what
honored
letter will the wheel
if you
choose?
would join us.
Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says wrong button. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Welcome Isla to Wordle with Gaga.
Tapping don't stop like a thun. Who will be crowned like a thun? Gremlin renowned like a
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
hearts be flying like a thun. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Shawners. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Y, please creative. Gaga Grumps says hi there, Isla. Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered, try I'd like word.
The creative one says all I can think of is urine.
Gaga grumps says you only got.
Grump says at Isla 2013 higher.
Gaga grumps says Alives at number 3 Wordle Street E needs a home. Trina says Glade.
Shauna says yeast.
Well, Creative One says Blade.
Gaga grumps says Space Fits.
Rex and Rocks says Trace.
Rex and Rocks says oops.
Trina says scale.
LL Creative One says scale.
Gaga grumps says wow, we have a SCAE.
Rex and Rock says scale.
Shauna says scale.
Gaga grumps says the only option I see. Bring on the fireworks.
Welcome Ellie to Wordle with Gaga.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode
Gaga
with
grumps
glee.
says Wordle in 3.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
As in her face, they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good day.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day.
Well, Creative One says at Ellie, the green letters are the ones that belong in that spot.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga grumps says we are starting with A. P. Gaga grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with P, please, Trina.
Trina says point, please.
Gaga Grumps says you have a point.
Welcome Millie to Wordle with Gaga.
Rex and Rock says goose.
Gaga Grumps says a greeno lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Stain says hi everyone.
Gaga Grumps says hi there Millie, welcome.
What creative one says torso.
Gaga Grumps says Stain is in the house.
Trina says at Stain hello. Or creative one says token.
Gaga Grumps says will we have the goose? Gaga Grumps says a yellow E in need of a home.
Stain says thank you for the welcome.
Rex and Rock says lover.
Gaga Grumps says no N for token.
Trina says cover.
Gaga Grumps says lover works.
Welcome Tilda, Yippee Tilda to Wordle with Gaga.
Trina says you.
Gaga Grumps says nice guess Rex.
Rex and Rock says lower.
Gaga Grumps says lower is the only option I see. Was expecting that to be a trap. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat for Rex.
Welcome Robin to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
We would be honored if you would join
Gaga
us.
Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da da da. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, thanks for doing your daily heart staying. Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says, thanks for following Minimalist.
Welcome rightwards pushing hand minimalist leftwards pushing hand to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, we are starting with A, B. Gaga Grumps says, leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says, want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts beat flying, like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says, I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Trina says, oops Grumps, haha.
Trina says, stain to choose.
Gaga Grumps says, lol. Trina says, denied. Gaga Grumps says, your word starting with B, please stain.
Stain says below.
Gaga Grumps says, below you got.
Grumps says, below the belt.
Gaga Grumps says, thanks Trina, made my day. Trina says, at Grumps lemon cake on the way, haha. Gaga Grumps says Yellow E in need of a home.
Grumps says at Trina 3 tiers minimum.
Trina says at Grumps and buttercream icing.
Gaga Grumps says face fits.
Book Creative One says black.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 5. S needs a home. Gaga Grumps says black doesn't fit creative. Gaga Grumps says scene works. LL Creative One says scare. Gaga Grumps says we have a second E in homeless N.
Trina says yes and Sue.
The Creative One says ensue.
Gaga Grumps says ensue is all I see too.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong.
Gaga Grumps says and we take a slight pause for another level up by Trina.
If support was letters, Cersei, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess it snapped. Level unlocked. Shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Welcome, Gremlin, to the game grotto. Good game. Welcome, Gremlin.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Settle down.
Good game.
Grab your heartbeat. Share us round. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game. Grotto.
Welcome Thomas BRW to Wordle with
Gaga
Gaga.
Baby Mark. Claim your points and prepare to vote.
Gang Gremlins on the scene. Whoa, whoa. Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Trina says at Grumps, did you
Now
listen?
tap that
It said we're friends.
Tap it,
Remember that so the crown is forgiven.
Gang gremlins, come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says he's been kicked out of chat. Trina lol. Trina says that Gaga and Grumps.
Grumps says at Trina nothing a 5-tier cake wouldn't heal.
Gaga Grumps says it was a 3-tier before. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Trina says don't ask for much, does he, Gaga?
The creative one says interesting first letters today.
Grumps says inflation is galloping.
Gaga Grumps says it's the button pushing tendencies. Just keeps on pushing lol. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. N. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Rex and Rox says type of coins XX.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin
Gaga Grumps says once you steal the starting word, send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Trina says good job. Us women can stand it. It'll keep
Welcome
loading
Eggs and
the
Bacon to
buttercream
Wordle with
Grumps.
Gaga.
Keep you happy.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says hi Eggs and Bacon, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with N please creative.
Grumps says perfectly good. Those 6 tiers will be great, I'm sure.
LL Creative 1 says let Rex and Rox choose. Gaga Grumps says inflation.
Rex and Rox says at LL Creative 1 tie.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with N please Rex. Gaga Grumps says hi SML.
Rex and Rox says nicer.
Gaga Grumps says nicer you got.
Welcome SML fan to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says I'm not sure Nepal is a word, but we have a format for first word SML. Stick around and try to win the next one.
Trina says basin.
Gaga Grumps says yellow N and I in need of a home.
Stain says China.
Gaga Grumps says basin fits.
Rex and Rox says SNL.
Gaga Grumps says I lives at number 4. Added a homeless A to RN.
Trina says no S.
Gaga Grumps says snail is a good shout.
Rex and Rox says oops.
Stain says avail. Trina says anvil.
Stain says NVM sorry.
Rex and Rox says until.
Well, Creative 1 says anvil.
Rex and Rox says oops.
Rex and Rox says yes anvil.
Stain says anvil.
Well, Creative 1 says could be until too.
Well, Creative 1 says no needs are.
Gaga Grumps says I think anvil is the only option. Gaga Grumps says no creative needs the O. Stain says at ill creative 1 there's an A.
It's playtime!
Rex and Rox says at LL Creative 1 there's an A.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly.
Stain says great job.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready?
Gaga Grumps says do the Gaga. Share the live chat for chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Gremlins, let's go. Team Gaga, Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Gremlins, let's go. Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Game! Gremlins, let's go.
Welcome Alina HH to Wordle with Gaga.
Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. M. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says hi Annie.
Like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts be flying like
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says shy back in the house.
Welcome Amania to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Alina. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with M please Grumps.
Grumps says mouse.
Che says Maisie is watching High School Musical with a smile.
Gaga Grumps says mouse you got. Gaga Grumps says wheel chose the right letter.
Rex and Rox says micro.
LL Creative 1 says market.
Stain says milky.
Rex and Rox says NVM.
Gaga grumps says ruining her earlier, you shy.
Chase says magic.
Gaga grumps says minty fits. Gaga grumps says no change.
Trina says March.
Creative One says market.
Gaga grumps says hi, Anthony. Gaga grumps says March works. Gaga grumps says I moved into number 2. LL Creative One says magic. Gaga grumps says I think I have it.
The Creative One says no, I.
Trina says McCall.
Gaga grumps says no, I for magic. Gaga grumps says McCall for Wordle in 4.
The Creative One says Morcor.
Stain says at Trina.
Gaga grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Gaga grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap
Gaga
that screen.
grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the last grid of the
Let's
game.
see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga grumps says we are starting with A. V. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top. Like-a-thon, tap and don't stop. Like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says 80k taps, awesome work. Gaga Grumps says let's end with Shy's traditional wipeout. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with V please Shy.
Che says value.
Jay says my new tradition is one yellow.
Gaga Grumps says value you got. Gaga Grumps says you failed.
Che says gloriously.
Stain says haunt.
Gaga Grumps says green arrives at number 2 Wordle Street. You needs a home. Rex and Rock says haunt. Gaga Grumps says horn fits. LL Creative 1 says taint. Gaga Grumps says you moved in next door to A.
Or Creative One says saucy.
Welcome Claire Ellis to Wordle with Gaga.
Claire Ellis says cork.
Stain says saucy.
Gaga Grumps says saucy works.
We would be honored if you would
Gaga
join
Grumps
us.
says Claire in the house for the final fireworks.
Or Creative One says no L for cock.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we end with fireworks.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place.
Rex and Rock says WB.
Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis
Gaga
make
Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Trina says nice.
Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay.
Trina says thank you for the live. Take care all.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 p.m. UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.